Yo, guys, what is up? Welcome back to some more Zero Hour. And today I've got another interview for you. So, you'll know from the previous interviews, we'd already spoken to Chris and Mark, who were some of the engineers who worked on many key aspects of the game. But today we have a game designer who worked on Zero Hour. So, he goes by the name of John Combs. And get this, he is the guy that came up with all of the different generals in the game. So, you know how you've got like laser, you've got nuke, you've got air force. This is all the doing of John. So I do want to say a massive shout out to John for coming on and speaking to me. I know he's not on social media a lot or at all. So coming on and speaking to me for nearly 2 hours is something I really do appreciate. So make sure you show him a lot of love in the comments and let's get into this. Oh.
Hello.
Hello. Nice background.
Thank you. Thank you. This is actually my typical background for when I work from home. So
Oh, really?
it looks impressive.
I thought you might have prepared it just for this.
Nope. Nope. This is typical. Yeah. The 0 hour pitch just is awesome. And I've had it ever since we shipped. So
Yeah.
which was 22 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, a long time now. Yeah, it's kind of crazy that we still play this game. Well, I still play it every day. And yeah, there's all this hype around it at the moment now, the release of the source code.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, cool. Welcome, John. The reason I'm really excited about this one is because, yeah, I heard I saw you on the credits. You're one of the designers of Zero Hour, and I think you even came up with the different generals for Zero Hour, the 12 generals. Is that right?
I did. Yes. That was, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I'm
Me,
super excited to hear about this.
me and partly one other designer named Chris Rubio. Yeah.
Okay, because I saw on the credits, I expected to see like designers and there'd be like maybe 2 or 3 max, but I saw there was like 12 or 13 on this game. Is that normal for a game to have that many? And what do they all do?
Normal now or normal then?
Both.
It actually really depends on the size of the project. Generals was a big project at the time, so you do tend to have one. If you want to get the game out in a certain amount of time, one level takes a designer, especially back then, 2 or 3 months. And that's just to design it to be played, laying out the terrain. And then an artist comes in and makes it pretty. And then you get the audio guys and the voice recordings and the writing. And it takes a lot to get it in there. So if you want to get it out in any normal time, if there's 13 missions and you have 13 designers, you get it out in, whatever time that takes, which is a lot shorter than having one designer, and it takes them 3 months each. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not necessarily for the whole game design itself, like all the factions, but also for the single levels in the campaign and things like that.
Sure.
Yeah,
Exactly.
okay.
And designers also pull back, especially back then, they pull double duty on some things. Like they also have to write the AI for the mission, and come up with triggers for when things get triggered, when you move units into a certain area and that sort of thing. So it's a lot more work than you'd think it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So yeah, your name's John Combs. We know you're one of the designers of the game from 22 years ago. But is there any other information you're willing to share? Like, I don't know where you're from, what you do at the moment.
I'm actually from a little farm town in Northeast Ohio. I'm a former hick, and I have a degree in mechanical engineering, which I never did past college. I got into IT. I worked at Progressive Insurance um, and First Energy, and then my older brother and I wrote a MUD from scratch. Which, do you know what a MUD is?
No, I don't actually.
It's basically, imagine World of Warcraft, but just text. So you walk into a room, it says this is what the room like, and you type north and you go north and you see other players and you can chat with them or cast fireball on, orc and
Okay.
so yeah, it's a MMO that's all text basically. And my brother and I loved them, so we wrote one. And I was actually looking to leave Ohio, and I put out my resume for an IT position, and a recruiter in the industry got 1 day of free on monster.com and found my resume. And I had one little line on there that said worked on Wolfshade Mud. And she saw it, went to our website and called me up, and she's like, "Do you mind if I rework your resume for the games industry?" I'm like, "Fuck yeah, go for it."
Yeah.
And then Westwood was one of the ones that she sent it out to, and they liked what they saw, and they called me, and I had a first interview, and then they sent out a writing interview, and then they flew me out to Las Vegas, and because I worked at Westwood Vegas first, And I interviewed there, and I came back, and my recruiter called me up and said they passed on you. And then
Okay.
2 days later, my older brother calls me up, and he's like, "You'll never believe this. This game studio in Las Vegas called me and wants to interview me." So they called him and interviewed him and offered a job as a different role, not the same role. So I was super happy with for him, but kind of devastated at the time. And then a month later, my recruiter called me up and said, "So you were their second choice, and the first choice couldn't keep his visa. So they want to offer you a job." So that's how I got in.
Hmm.
And yeah, I started June of 21. So I've been making games for 24 years. First, I did a game called Earth and Beyond, and then you can see right there. Um,
Hmm.
Actually, after E&B, I started working on a Command and Conquer 4 title or 3 title. And that's when a couple months into that is when EA shut down Westwood and moved me to Los Angeles. So I got into Los Angeles, and the first thing we did there was work on Zero Hour. I did one multiplayer map for generals when we got there, but then Zero Hour started, and we'll get into the whole Zero Hour thing. And then
Hmm.
after it was dead, I went back to a different version of Command and Conquer 3. And then a couple months in, they shut that down to move me to Battle for Middle Earth. So I did
Okay.
that, after that, that was that was a really, really rough project. If you ever look up a blog written by somebody called EA Spouse, it
Oh, I've
was
heard about this. Yeah.
that was Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle-earth. That was the project. I was on the Leander Hasty, her fiance, sat 2 cubes over from me.
Okay.
So that was really rough. So I moved up to Washington and got a job at Gas Powered, where I did Spring Commander, Fortune Alliance. I was the creative director for Demigod, which was the first commercial MOBA that came out before League of Legends, but was not nearly as successful. And then a couple of guys I worked with started a studio called Uber Entertainment. And then I went over and worked with them, and I did the 2 Monday Night Combat games. Then we did Planetary Annihilation, and PA Titans. And I did a little mobile game because I had kids for the time. And there's a thing for in movies and games where you want to do something for your kids. So I did a cute little tower defense game that was about you had marble shooters and rubber band shooters and little toys and stuff. Then I went on and did 2 VR games that nobody's heard of because they were Google Daydream games.
Okay.
But after that, I flipped to the publisher side, and I was the CTO for Tiny Build for a year and a half. And I shipped 17 games with them with over 35 SKUs. Learned a lot during that time. Then I tried to hand it my own company for a year and a half. We were working on a robot fighting game where you train them like you're the coach, and it actually used reinforcement AI so they go out there and fight the way you train them. But we ran out of money. And I went back to work for Bob and John again for a company called Team Grit, and we did a game called Grit. It was a cowboy battle royale. It was actually really fun. Unfortunately, because typical indie, we were running out of money, and somebody backed up the money truck. It was Gala Games if we put NFT cowboy uniforms in the game. So we did, but it came out about 2 months after the NFT market crashed.
Okay.
So we pivoted and started doing industrial annihilation. Which is still going on, but financial issues made me leave, and now I work on Age of Empires games, which is, it's kind of cool. I'm probably one of the only people in the world that can say I've worked on 3 of the 5-ish major RTS franchises. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Wow.
that's my career in a nutshell. It's a lot of
So
games, a lot of games. I've worked on a grand. Oh, there was another one. We didn't ship it, but if you look up a game called Human Resources on Kickstarter, that was my game, and I was excited about it. We actually had it playable internally, but we had to cancel it for various reasons, fortunately.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry to hear that. Yeah. Okay. So what do you do now then? You're working on Age of Empires games now, did you say? Or
Yeah,
okay.
market mind. That's one of the things I can't talk about. I can just say
Okay.
I work on Empires games.
Okay. Blink twice for Age of Empires 5. I'm joking. Okay. No, that's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, there's loads of stuff there. So how many games in total have you worked on then? There's loads there, yeah?
It's over 30.
Okay.
If you count the ones that didn't ship, it's closer to 35. Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Really, really interesting. Some good ones in there.
a lot of them
Uh,
behind.
yeah. 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 I can see Demigod and yeah. Somebody was Invictus. Is that? Was that? Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Planetary Annihilation, PA,
Okay.
Supreme Commander. The statues are running in combat. I worked on Hello Neighbor.
Yeah.
There's a couple of games down here. The unfortunate thing is, around the mid 20s, 2015s, 20 teens, we stopped making box games. So I don't really have any much to show because they stopped making box
Yeah.
games.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything's online now, but it's always good when you find one of the boxes. It brings back the memories. Let's get into generals and zero hour then. So, what did you do on both of the games, or was it just on zero hour? You tell me.
Well, like I said earlier, the only thing I really did on Generals is I worked on one um, one game or one map for it. Is my video backwards, by the way? Is Generals backwards?
Uh, no, no,
I
no. I can see everything's fine. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, because in
The,
mine it's like Generals is backwards, and I'm like, I hope it's not coming off that way.
yeah, I don't use Zoom that often, but there is a setting in there called mirror or something. I don't know if that mirrors it just for you, but to me, it looks fine. So,
Okay, so that looks backwards.
maybe to you, but to me, it looks okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, I wanted to show off, so everything looks cool.
Yeah, it looks good.
So I did very little on Generals, but on Zero Hour, uh, I was new. So when EA combined what they called the Southwest Studios, it was Westwood Las Vegas, Westwood Irvine, and they had just bought in DreamWorks Interactive. So they took those three studios and merged us into one studio in Bel Air. So I worked in Bel Air for a little bit until EA built a studio in south of there in Playa Vista, nice big new building. So the Westwood Irvine guys were kind of the leaders. They walked in, and the Westwood Vegas guys, for lack of a better term, were kind of second degree citizens. So what happened was I spent a lot of time watching the design leadership sit and talk and chat and everything. And I'm a I'm a very technical designer. Actually, in this day, with all I've done, I do everything. I write a lot of code. I do a lot of game design. I done producing and marketing and everything. Something I'm very proud of. So I kind of got tired of watching them do things. So, and being the technical guy I am, I had a vision for Zero Hour. It was called Generals, and there was no generals in the game. So I started slapping together pieces, parts of different units through all the data files. So like one of the first things I did was I took the GLA tunnel and put an anthrax sprayer on top of it, and I tried those different things, and I brought a producer in and I said, I think this is what we can do. And he kind of flipped. He was like, this is so cool. So spent some time at first, and then brought Chris Rubier in, and we designed 12 generals, and basically taking each faction and splitting them into like different themes, which is what the game ended up being. So spent a lot of the time implementing those things, working with production, getting it done. And then I also wrote the Skirmish AI as well, and I did the Toxin General challenge map as well. So did a lot on that project. That project was only 3 months long. Like we banged
Wow.
it out. We banged it out quick. I mean, if you look at
Mhm.
the release dates, Generals came out in I think February of 23, and Zero
Mm.
Hour was like August, and
Yeah.
they merged the studios in end of March. So there was a little bit of getting to know each other, and then we rolled right into Zero Hour and put it out pretty quick. Yeah.
Mhm. Were you always told the release date was going to be August? I think it was September in the end. Were you always told it was going to be that time from the beginning? So you had to like move fast.
Yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Okay.
So that's kind of why we went with. we could have spent a lot of time trying to stitch together a big story and done filming and stuff, but we didn't really have time. So that's where I came up, why don't we do fighting game style where it's this general versus this general, that sort of thing. And that's what we ended up going with. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's really cool.
There was a
Just to
there was a Street Fighter 2 machine at EALA and when we were in the Bel Air studio, and us and the Medal of Honor guys would fight against each other, and yeah. So it was kind of the fighting game theme was kind of pervasive at the time.
Okay, yeah, I can see that now from the General's Challenge where that comes from. That's really cool to know. Just to rewind a little bit, then there might be some people who are interested which mission you made exactly in Generals. First of all, do you remember?
The toxin general. Oh, in generals I
In
didn't do.
I thought you said you did one mission or one level.
I did one multiplayer level,
Oh,
and
like
on
like a map.
yeah, a map that we released later. So it wasn't much. It wasn't much.
Do
And
you,
I
do you
forget.
remember what map it was? No.
I don't remember.
Ah,
No.
okay. It might be some of the original ones we still play nowadays, like from way back.
It was because I made a bunch of them. Because
Okay.
we were at that time, it was like the Westwood Vegas guys were coming in, and we kind of had to prove ourselves. So I made one that we were given a list of names that they had already translated and stuff. There was one called Power Play that I made that kind of looked like a hockey rink. I made another one that basically it was everything's all the buildings started out half destroyed, and it made like an apocalyptic match. And our art director went in and loved it and changed the lighting and everything, so it looked like this total like post-apocalyptic map. But production was convinced that generals should be beautiful, so that didn't ship. So we
Yeah.
did a bunch of maps. I don't remember which one actually went out.
Okay. And then obviously in Zero Hour we have the three original factions. And then you've got nine specific generals. Were there any other contenders for generals that didn't come to be? Like obviously we've got nuke, we've got infantry, we've got laser. Were there any other offshoots that you thought of that didn't go ahead,
Were there?
or was it always those?
It was always just those. There
Okay.
might have been one or two that we cut earlier that just weren't working. Some of the ones that shipped were fairly dressed, particularly the super weapon general was fairly drastic from what we had working at one point. But it got changed. So the super weapon general originally, in fact, the people that have hacked the files apart see this. They had no tanks, and it was all the ion beam came in really early, and you used those instead of tanks. But then there was tomahawk launchers and the nukes. So it was that faction was all about instead of moving around tanks and stuff, you were constantly using your super weapons to kill stuff. And leadership decided that was going to be too difficult to balance. So that's why we backed off on it quite a bit. Another big change that happened was the Toxin General originally didn't have tanks. Um, but they did when they shipped. There was a lot of in any big company you have politics going on, and there was a lot of people wanting certain things. So that got put back in, and if you look at the win rates, the Toxin General tends to be a little bit better than all the other ones, and that's the reason why. They originally didn't have tanks, so their Toxin tanks were much beefier, but it was all about slowly wearing down the other tanks with their toxins. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so on the super weapon general, they actually don't have any tanks. I mean, the meta is to make Humvees with missile defenders for pretty much all of the USAs. But yeah, super weapon doesn't have Crusader tank or Paladin.
It's been a while.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. I understand that. um, yeah, and you're right. Toxin general is crazy strong. I think it's like the second strongest army overall in the current win rates.
Yeah.
Um,
And this was, I mean, was originally like the first year or two out. Obviously over time people come with different strategies and different metas and that sort of thing.
yeah,
That's happened in every RTS I've shipped.
yeah. So there's a few things missing from the game that like people have found in the game's files, like the two missing boss generals, for example, Ironside, the USA one, Deathstrike, the GLA one. Were they cut due to time constraints, or
Yes.
yeah,
And I forget what they were. That was one of the ones where they just we had played around with a lot of stuff, and they just weren't kind of working. Their theme. I don't remember what their theme was. Like I said, it's after I shipped Zero Hour and rolled on to Battle for Middle Earth. It was a long time ago, and then I
Yeah.
left EA, so I never really went back. Unfortunately, I mean, to be honest, working on Zero Hour was one of the most fun times I've ever had in my career. It really was. It was just kind of how do we do cool shit? And that's what we did. It was really the only time I had better was working on Monday Night Combat. That was my favorite. So,
Hmm.
and that was 2008 through 2012, both Monday Night Combat and Super Monday Night Combat. Um, but yeah, we tried a lot of stuff. You dig through the files, you'll see a US Tomahawk launcher that looks like the GLA Scud launcher. There's a US nuke launcher that, we built the art, they were going in the game, but the decision to pull those through happened late. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I
Very
appreciate.
typical. That's very typical in games, by the way, is to put something in, try it, and it's not working. And then, especially when there's a big time constraint, there's no reason to spend a lot of time. A lot of times things will get hooked up all over the code, and it's better to just turn off the UI if it's not working. So it all depends. That stuff happens. I have never shipped a game where it looked anything like the original concept.
Yeah.
The closest was Planetary Annihilation. If you look at the Kickstarter video and what we shipped, that is by far the closest I've ever gotten from original concept to ship game.
Hmm. Yeah, I think from my point of view, that's understandable because I think the mission you undertook there is very, very difficult. You're having 12 different armies and trying to create it balanced all within the space of what, 6 months ish. I think that's quite a difficult thing to do.
3 to 4 months, more like it. Yeah.
More
I,
okay.
I
Yeah.
think Zero Hour went into like full production in May, either late April or early May, and we had it done by August or September. So it was a very tight window. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So besides the generals, then, is there anything else that you designed that we haven't mentioned already
Well,
or
yeah, I
came
did
up with?
generals and I did the Toxin General Challenge, and I wrote the Skirmish AI. Well, I expanded the general Skirmish AI. Yeah. We worked a lot. Those were
Yeah.
late nights. That was back
When?
when crunch was way more acceptable than it is
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. When you say expanded the skirmish AI, what does that mean? Sorry.
Well, the generals AI did something, but I had to add in, personalities based on the new generals because you couldn't take the generals AI and, for example, put in the super weapon JI when the generals AI built tanks. Super
Okay.
weapon one, so that was more. And there's new units and new super weapon abilities, or generals abilities. So yeah, that's what I mean. I took the generals AI and made it work for Zero Hour. Yeah.
Yeah. So some of the other guys I've spoke to, like Chris Mornis and Mark, they mentioned how Zero Hour effectively is kind of a mod because it's all done in the ini files. Is that kind of what it is?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, having the generals part was the INI files, and I did a lot of those. In fact, I did almost all of them. Guys like Chris and Mark, they were engineers, so they wrote the code to make all those things work. And those are great guys, by the way. I love working with those guys.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of it was the INI files. Yeah.
Okay.
And that was the technical part of me is I could just go in through when I did that toxin gun on the tunnel network. It was literally like putting together some INI files to just do proof of concept. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Um. So there's two factions or two generals in the game. The USA original, the vanilla faction, and the USA laser. They're both very very similar with like maybe three or four differences, like the laser turret, laser tank. But apart from that, they're all very similar. But I think hidden in the game's files is like a laser ranger, a laser Burton, I think a laser Comanche. Were they? What was the reason they were pulled or didn't make it? Do you know?
Timing. There
Okay.
was there was there was a big meeting about a month before we shipped where we had a discussion with so Dustin Browder was the lead on generals, and he went off on to start Battle for Middle Earth. And when we got to that point, we sat down with him and stuff, and he was the one that balanced generals, and he was really skeptical we could get a balance in time. So we pulled some stuff because it came down to time frame. I think it was the right choice. Dustin's a super smart dude. I mean, he also went on to be the game director of StarCraft 2. So
Oh wow.
he's no slouch, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, those type of things happen. Like I said, those things happen during development based on there's so much more that goes into building a game than just building the game. There's timelines and business needs and marketing needs and how much money you have and budget. There's a lot. And sometimes, every time, you have to cut something or change something. And those are casualties of that.
Okay. And do you know why the naval units were cut from the game? Was that due to a balance thing or a time or?
Just time
Yeah.
and budget. Yeah, you have to make the decision about what to cut. I mean, Generals was on a pretty somewhat tight time frame. And then, it's just naval is a whole different beast that's just hard to, because I don't know how much you make or know about how video games are made, but when you do naval, it's an entirely different navigation system. It's entirely different navigation uh, type. There's all kinds of layers now you have to worry about things that can float on water, things that are only on land. You got to make sure your land units don't walk on water. We did that on Planetary Annihilation and Supreme Commander, and it adds a magnitude of complexity. So when you can cut something, naval's a good thing to cut because it adds so
Okay.
much.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize that actually. I thought you were going to say it messes with the balance too much because you make one battleship and it just wrecks everything. But I didn't realize all that. Yeah, with the complexities you just mentioned, I didn't realize that. So
On Planetary Annihilation, we even went as far as like there's units that can walk on the bottom of the water, and there's units on top of the water. And we actually had a whole orbital layer of things that can fly orbit, and yeah, it got crazy. So
okay. Yeah. Okay. When you guys, were you one of the play testers as well? Were you all play? Because Chris Mornis, I think it was, mentioned that you were play testing until silly hours in the morning, and then
oh
finding
yeah.
bugs. And were you part of that as well?
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it was the whole team that was constantly working on it. It was a lot of hours, but it really was a fun time. The people we worked with were I worked with a lot of different types of people, and Zero Hour was one of my most fond memories.
Hmm. And yeah, like I mentioned before, the current meta with like any of the USA factions is to basically make Humvees and then missile defenders, like because you can make that like off the bat from the beginning with no tech upgrade. Did you guys envisage that for the game at the time, or not really? No.
No. When you're building the game, you do what you think is best, especially in 2003. We couldn't just, put out a patch and update the balance. We would have had to have a whole download thing that you had to download. If Generals was made now, it'd be a whole different story. It's just a lot of that was the sign of the times. Yeah. And
Yeah.
you do the best you can. We all played test. We had a couple of testers, um, you know, people that were super good at the game, people that were just new. And there's so many moving parts remember, we also have to do difficulty levels and things like that. So we have people that aren't very good that are playing at one difficulty level. And we also had to play test and test all the challenge maps. So it's a lot. It's a lot. And you do the best you can and hope it comes out for the best. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, things are much easier now. The way you would just release something online, people would buy it and download it online, and you can just patch it as many times as you want, I guess. But like
Yeah.
my General's copy, I think well, I've still got the box from when I bought it in the shop. So back then, internet was like, I don't know, was it 56k modems back then? So that's the reason you're referring to, I think, isn't it? Why updates would be more difficult back then, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you can't have two people playing with a different balance against each other. So if you download it on a CD and you install it that way and you don't upgrade and you want to play against somebody who has, it just doesn't work. So all that stuff back then was way more difficult. And you look at
Mhm.
games now like League of Legends, they put out a patch every couple weeks, which changes the balance. And that would have been great to do. That would have been awesome. Yeah.
Mhm. Oh, League of Legends still release balance patches now, do they?
Oh yeah, yeah. I actually
Okay.
still play it. I've been playing it since beta. Not religiously, not all the time, but I
Yeah.
go back to it every month or so and just it's kind of everybody's got that default game they fall back to. And League of Legends is mine.
Yeah, yeah. I think I played about 50 games on that. I did enjoy it, but I think yeah, to be really good at that, you really need to invest some
Yeah.
serious time. I think.
And I mean, like I said earlier, I did Demigod, which
Mm,
was, when I was at GPG, we did a lot of playing the Dota mod for Warcraft 3. So, and then when I was offered to lead up a project, I was like, I want to do this mod is really popular. We should make a game like that. And that was Demigod. Yeah.
okay. Do you have any funny stories from the time when you worked on Zero Hour? Anything funny happen in the office? Like, everyone I spoke to said it was a good time, and like you said, some of the favorite times in their career.
I don't remember anything specific,
Yeah.
but I mean, some of it too, a big thing is we moved into the Bel Air building and it was small. It could not house all of us. So we were basically sitting on top of each other. I sat in a little office with five other people. We were literally, our chairs were back to back. So it got that feeling of we're all in it together.
Okay.
So, and personalities meshed for the most part. So that helped too. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned also you worked on Battle for Middle Earth. Can you maybe describe briefly what you did for that game too?
I wrote the AI. I wrote the skirmish AI and expanded it to support all the different single player levels. Yeah.
Okay.
I came onto that project late because I was working on a version of Command and Conquer 3. And since I had written the AI for Zero Hour, they were like, can you write the AI for this? And I actually came to find out a couple years later that after I left and for Battle for Middle Earth 2, it actually became known as the John Combs AI. I had no idea until years later that, that the AI. And honestly, I've written AIs for a number of games now, and that was my worst one. I was really not happy with how that one turned out. But it doesn't matter. Everybody played it and didn't notice. So there's a
Mhm.
big difference between perfect code and shipping code.
Yeah. Okay. How do you see the design of AI going forward in the future? Like now, you see the rise of artificial intelligence and all these different models. I'm only waiting for the day where a real AI can pick up a game like off the bat and self-learn. Do you have any knowledge on that or any vision on
That,
it?
that- that's going to happen in the next 2 years. Yeah. It's already, I've already thought about it for the games I'm working on. Like,
Yeah.
it just makes AI has become such a great tool. Like I work with AI, I don't work on AI, I work with because it helps me. About 10 to 15% of the code I write is AI written, because like on industrial annihilation, I had to write ballistics calculations. So you know where your target is, how far it is away, and how fast you want the projectile to go. Now I could have spent days looking up on the internet what those calculations are, what the formulas were, and trying to turn it into code. Instead, I went to Copilot and said, "Hey, I need this calculation in Unreal," and it spit out the code, and I was done with it in a matter of hours. It makes certain things that have been tedious are now, especially when you're trying to come up with a foundation to build off of. Yeah, it just makes it so much easier. And then when you do reinforcement learning and can have it fight against each other and learn that way, the actual hardest part about that becomes how do I dial the AI back in order to play against, the easier levels. That actually, because you let it play, it'll come up with the best way of playing. So yeah, the hardest part is how do I make it easier? Now, to say I haven't done that yet, but I've worked a lot with AI that I can see that coming.
Yeah. Do you think, like, obviously Generals and Zero Hour is an old game? Uh, do you see us being able to get an AI model into that game somehow? I mean, now the source code's out there, maybe someone can do it, or do you think there'll be an AI that can just pick up any game and just learn it like a human would? I mean, how do you see that?
Now that the source code out there, it's definitely possible to do it. Um, but somebody has to understand how to hook in the code and actually write the code. Um, there hasn't, as far as I know, been any kind of AI that can read a screen and understand what's on the screen. Not to say that's not coming. I'm sure it's coming. But as of right now, it can absolutely be done, but it has to be someone that knows how to hook an AI into the code, which would be
Okay.
interesting. If somebody does that, I'd love to see it. like I said, I've worked a bit with AI now, and that would be, I know that's coming. In fact, Planetary Annihilation actually has a neural network in it for the tactical fighting. When you put it on the hardest level, um, the bots will run in and out and dodge projectiles and stuff because we trained it. A guy named Mike Robbins was really into it when we were working on that game, and he put that in. Who Mike actually took my AI from Supreme Commander and modded it to be better, and we liked him so much we ended up hiring him. So
Okay. So you mentioned a few things here. What can you tell me what is reinforcement learning and what is I mean, I've heard the name neural network mainly probably from Elon Musk's company, but what does that mean in simple terms to regular people like me?
the neural network is the way it learns. It's the meat of, and I mean, AIs, they're learning to program it differently. But back then, and the core of it is just a way to take in data, look at it, and then rate it, and look at it again, rate it, and that's what AI does. I mean, it churns through the data over and over and over again to find a pattern. So there's three types of basic AI. There's I'm completely blanking on the name, but basically it's go through all this data and tell me what's right and wrong, and I'll learn from it. And that's like how you do facial recognition. Here's what human faces look like. Here's not human faces look like. Here's billions of terawatts of data, churn through it all and learn what a face is and what's not. Then there's oh, that's directed learning. Then there's indirect learning, which is here's a ton of data, figure out the patterns, and then when I ask you what the pattern is, tell me what the result is. So that's like some of that could be like learning how to read voices and how to read English and stuff. You can give it a whole bunch of stuff, but you can't say this is a word, this is because it's all audio. And then reinforcement learning, which is what's being used a lot now, and what I used in the game when I had my company, is instead of giving it, you can give it some data, but you tell it to do something, and then you give it rules on what the outcome was, and it takes those rules and that forms a data set and feeds it back in and runs it again. And that's how games work. You tell it to run, hey, you didn't win, but these are all the things you did. Take the data, what you did, put it back in, try a different way, have it run, what's your outcome, and you just do that a billion times. You know,
Okay.
there's a really cool YouTube site. I forget what it is, but he makes these little cubes that learn how to play dodgeball and stuff. And it's fascinating. And he shows you like iterations over and over, and you can actually see it learn over time. It's really cool.
Okay. So I suppose in StarCraft 2, I think they've already built some kind of AI. Is it called Alpha Star? Do you know about that?
I've heard of it. I don't really know what it is.
Yeah.
I know there was a research, uh, I think it was a college research group that did that with Dota 2. And Dota 2 ended up beating like one of the championship teams or something like that. The I did, yeah.
Yeah. That made me just remember that Alpha Star one in StarCraft 2 because, like you said, it becomes too good and you have to tone it back. Like I think the Alpha Star one was doing like 9,000 APM and it was like doing all kinds of crazy things that a human player would never do, and they had to limit its APM to I don't know 300 or 200 or something.
Yeah. What I'm looking forward to is you do reinforcement learning on a game before you ship it, and it comes up with the strategies you didn't think of and what's broken. Like the stuff you're talking about in generals now, I can figure out the meta by letting AI and then, correct it, you know.
Yeah.
But there's
Yeah.
honestly, this might be a trade secret, but there is, especially now that you can release updates to a game, there is very much something to be said of changing the AI or the balance and purposely making certain things a little unbalanced to keep the game fresh. League of Legends does that all the time. They're always trying to find that perfect balance, but meta shifts, and if the meta shifts too far, you want to change the balance, and then the meta shifts a different way, and that keeps the game fresh and interesting because everybody's always looking for a better way to play. And RTS has also fallen into that category. You always want to find a better way to play, and when numbers change, you're like, "Ooh, how do I
Mm.
find the new, best way to play?" Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I have thought that before actually, because one of the only other games I play is Counter Strike, Counter Strike 2, or CS:GO. And Valve released an update once that took the revolver, which is like a really useless weapon that no one ever got. Everybody always had the Desert Eagle, but they made the revolver like 2,000% more more damage or something, and you could even like just run and just one shot people in the leg. And I was like, there's no way they haven't balance tested this. It's just ridiculous. Everyone's running around with this $800 pistol that's like anyone can buy. But at the time,
Yeah.
I thought they've probably done this on purpose to keep things fresh and to now people are using the revolver. Later they nerfed it, but yeah, it did make me think that might be a thing.
And there's also some touchy things. Like League of Legends has been accused of this many times, where they put out a new champion, and everybody says, "Oh, they're overpowered," and it's just overpowered so they can sell more. As a game designer, I know that they tried to make it as balanced as possible, but they feel overpowered because nobody's played against them before. It's be like if I released a new Generals faction right now, people are like, "Oh, it's overpowered," because you haven't found the meta yet. You haven't
Yeah.
figured out what they're good at and how to counter them. So
But yeah, with the rise of AI, in 5 years' time, you should never really have like the thing of imbalance, really. If it's been AI tested, you just leave it running a few nights, come back, and you've got the meta, no?
yeah, pretty much. Yeah. But that's where one of the things, I'm not scared of AI. I'm excited about it. I think that AI is going to be a net positive in the world. What I think it's going to do for games is it's going to allow creative people to focus on being creative. Like right now, I'm a designer, but I write a lot of code because I want to try a design, and the code doesn't magically happen, so I got to write the code and test it and see if I like it. The number of times I've put something in that in my brain was this awesome idea, and it gets to screen, and I'm like, oh, this is terrible, and I got to rip it back out, and I lost weeks of time. When I can say, hey, AI, build this for me, and I can test it, and 15 minutes later and be like, oh no, I want to tweak it like this. I want to tweak it. It allows me to focus on my creativity and not the implementation part.
Mhm. Yeah, it's good to hear that it's already saving you about 15% of your time or whichever number you said. Also, I didn't.
It recently literally saved me 3 days worth of time.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it produces like exactly what you want to a very good standard. There's no issues with the code it's generating for you.
It produces a good foundation that you can build up. It does not do exactly. Now, I will say if I spend a lot more time tweaking the prompts, I may get a lot closer. But there's a point in which, it's like I could spend my time working on prompts, or I can fix the bugs and see it in game. So, but it's getting better all the time. It's getting better
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah, there's not like even a month goes by where I check my Gmail and I've got an update about a new AI model or something like that. It's really developing crazy, crazy quick. So is Copilot the best for writing code? Because I heard like DeepSeek might be the best. I don't know if you trust DeepSeek with the Chinese government apparently owning it or whatever.
It's it's interesting. Like you just said, it's advancing so fast. Like I hate to disparage the company I'm working for, but I loved Copilot. I love it. I had used Copilot and ChatGPT and Gemini and all of them, and Copilot always came out with the best. But recently I tried Copilot and on this thing that I've been working on, and it did a great job. But I was like, I'm gonna try Gemini, and Gemini did a better job. And that's because Google just put out its new model. So, and then, next month, Copilot might put out a new model and it does a better job. And then there's all the sub models. I just heard of something called Claude, which apparently is one of the best coding AIs. It's changing so fast that it's hard to say which one's better because next month it might be a different one.
True,
Yeah.
true, yeah. Do you also think that AI will make like the cinematics and the storyline and the videos that you see that probably cost a lot of time in games as well? Like the cinematics, the tank battles, stuff like that?
That is a complicated question. Do I think they can do it? Yes, absolutely. I think it absolutely can do it, and it will. The questions to me are how much will the actors' unions try to stop it? How much will, because there's rightfully fear over AI taking their jobs, I don't think they will. I think there is like I said, when you can focus on create, no matter what AI can take over, it can't replace your creative brain. So if you have a creation idea in your head, AI can't take that from you, but you can use AI to make it come to life. So there will definitely be that. If I was writing if I was an indie again, and I wanted to make a cinematic, I would absolutely use Gemini or whatever. VO just came out and it's kind of mind blowing how good it is.
Yeah.
Um,
The
but
VO3, yeah.
if I was, making an Age of Empires one, and it's a huge franchise. If World's Edge, who I work for, it's Microsoft Studio. Most people don't know World's Edge because it's always Age of Empires, or World's Edge is the name of the studio that makes it. Um, if we were to put out a video and it didn't use a SAG actor, SAG would raise a stink over it. So I do think it's going to be a big part, but there's still a lot of negotiation that needs to go on, still a lot of minutia that needs to be figured out because, rightfully so, people don't want to lose their jobs. And there's also issues that, if I made a video and I'm like, oh, I want this woman to look exactly like Anne Hathaway, Anne Hathaway is going to get kind of upset, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of debate over that as well.
Yeah, if it looks like an existing actor, but if it was from scratch though, like a brand new character,
Yeah.
don't think the unions. Well, I don't know the specifics, but I don't think the unions or whoever would have any say. No, because if
They
they're
don't
creating a
know
brand new scratch from scratch.
They have no say, but they're also big enough that they can make a pretty big stink about it. In fact, if
Okay.
you look at Genshin Impact maker Hoyoverse, and they make Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail and Zenless Zone Zero and Honkai Impact, they're actually having quite the back and forth with the voice actors about it. They've actually had to replace some voice actors and stuff. So that's a perfect example of what is sort of already here, but coming big time about using AI for that kind of thing.
Hmm. Yeah, I heard someone say with the rise of AI, like in 10 years' time, most of the jobs that exist in sorry, most of the job titles in 10 years you won't have heard of before, like I don't know, prompt writer, for example, and things like that. I
Right. I
think
mean,
that
I look,
how
I think about it every time a major advancement has happened, there's a lot of fear on it. And someone, my age, I just turned 50 last month, or actually back in April. I forgot it's June. Um, I got to watch the rise of the internet, and a lot of the same fears I'm hearing now, I heard back then. But when in the year 2000, we had no concept of an idea of like social media or the gig economy or smartphones. We could not even fathom those things. So there's going to be things like that in AI that we can't even think of that and all these technological advances have always produced more jobs than they've taken away. They will take some away, but I just know there's going to be applications that we haven't thought of yet. And prompt writer is probably a good example.
Yeah, yeah, there's definitely a skill to writing the most detailed prompts.
In
Like
fact, I
I've re-
learned recently that one of the best ways to use the prompt is to ask the AI the best way to ask it how to do something. I found that really funny.
I like to take an example image of something that I want to create, and I put it into a what's it called, an image to prompt generator. I think it's like uses Chat GPT, I think, and then it describes the image in a massive block of text. And I think, oh yeah, that's really good, but I would never have described it like that, but it does describe it well. And then you can use that to create new images or make a video. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but I also heard the theory of like humans rule the world, or the like the apex predator because we're the smartest. Like if we come one on one against a gorilla in the jungle or a lion, of course the lion or whatever is gonna kill us. But we rule the world, and because we're smarter, we have the technology and stuff like that. But if you make an AI that's then smarter than humans, that's where it becomes like the gray area, like what's going to happen. I think it's really exciting.
I also look at it, you get an AI that's smarter than humans, they can figure out how to cure cancer or fix climate change or,
Yeah,
these things that have so much data that our brains aren't smart enough to process it all, but a computer can. So
yeah,
that's the part I'm excited about.
yeah. Like, solve the mysteries of the universe, like a black hole or the Big Bang. But also,
I'm
yeah, go
So
on.
I was going to say, I love battery tech. I don't know why. It's just something hits me. And reading about AIs, them using AIs to come up with new materials that can now do like 1,000 miles to a charge on a EV,
Oh,
like because an AI came up with a material combination we didn't think of. That stuff really excites me.
that's really cool. But then you also have the potential of a bad actor to get it and create, like, I don't know, the most
Yeah.
poisonous chemical known to man that kills us all by virus or something. So,
Yeah, that's why I say a net positive. I mean, the internet's the
Yeah.
same way, right? I mean, we see bad actors on the internet and good actors, and to me, AI is gonna end up the same way. We're gonna find a medium somewhere that, you know, I've
Hmm.
heard of, AI is being built to detect when you use AI to write your term paper, an anti-AI AI. So there will always be people that fight against it. That's my point.
Yeah. Mhm. How is the games industry right now? Chris Mornis, who I'd spoke to, had said it had been a challenging time for everyone in the games industry. Obviously, you're working with the company you're working for now, but is it generally a challenging time? You think?
Oh yeah. So it's a challenging time for several reasons. Um, Mostly because the last few years, like in with inflation and interest rates and stuff going on, a lot of the funding has disappeared. So if you're an indie wanting to get a bigger project funding that you can't fund yourself, that has become extremely difficult. Kickstarter doesn't do as well as it used to. When we did Planetary Annihilation, we had a Kickstarter that made $2.2 million. You can't really do that with a video game anymore. So funding has become a real issue for indies and smaller companies. And then for bigger companies, it's become so expensive to have an employee, especially for ones that like I live in Seattle. I am not cheap. People in San Francisco, LA are not cheap. And when you start adding up people's salaries and stuff, it gets really expensive really quick. So that's a really hard bet. If you're going to spend $100 million on a game, you better be sure that that game's going to make at least $100. Which might sound, a lot of people spin that as greedy companies or whatever. But on the flip side, like I like my job, and if the company starts losing money, they got to cut people, So and it's I found when I was in indie, there's an idea in the general public that once you reach $1 million in funding, all of a sudden you have infinite money, and that's not the case at all. I mean, if you think about it, in places like Seattle and San Francisco, because I've run a company, I understand this stuff. You're looking at for one employee when it comes to their salary plus their health care and 401(k) benefits and time off, you're looking at $20,000 per person a month, every month. You have 10 people, that's 200 grand a month. That's $2.4 million a year just for 10 people. So that's one of the things that become funding has become a real challenge. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay. Does it surprise you that EA released the source code for General Zero Hour and a bunch of other Command and Conquer games?
It surprises me and not surprises me at the same time. Like it surprises me that a company the size of EA would release any of their proprietary stuff. Like that seems like a big risk to me. But at the same time, to be frank, they kind of killed the franchise. They kind of completely destroyed it. So if you're going to revive it in any way, put it in the hands of the public, of people like you who love it. And if they can come up with some big mod or something, and I mean, and studios and publishers look at something, and like I learned this from working at Tiny Build, like you want to make a bet. It's all bets. You don't know if a game's going to do well before you ship it. You think it does, but you never know. That's why we see flops. Everybody that worked on flops thinks the game's going to be great. And, some big games, you didn't know they were going to be big. So if you put it out and somebody mods it and that mod garners a lot of attention and people downloading it, then building another one tells you that I've lowered my risk of shipping this thing and actually making money off of it. And that's important when you're a publisher or a studio. You always want
Mhm.
to lower risk as much as possible.
Okay. So the community definitely will. They're already working on it now. A bunch of guys working on a big community patch that will like fix loads of bugs, desyncs, hopefully improve the lag, FPS issues, things like that. So let's say that comes in 12 months or whatever, and the game gains loads of traction and gets loads more downloads. Is your view then is EA are using that as like they'll see how well it does, and if it takes off loads, they might reconsider visiting the franchise or
That wouldn't surprise me at all. And honestly, what also wouldn't surprise me is if the group of people that did those mods don't form a company and EA contracts them out to build it. That's happened on many occasions. Yeah. because why bring new people in and train them up and learn everything when you got a set of people out there ready to go to build your next game? So have them form a company and give them a bunch of money to make your next game. If you know your risk has been lowered because lots of people love this stuff, and you know that there's a team out there that can pull it off, that's really attractive to any studio or publisher. That's
Mhm.
low risk. That's low risk but high reward, and that's what the business is all about. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it seems like lately the trend, especially in Command and Conquer, has been like mobile games. Is that because they're a lot lower budget, less risk, more higher reward, higher return on those games? Do you think?
They actually aren't that super low budget anymore.
Okay.
Mobile games that are free to play, you're looking at tens, 20s, millions of dollars to build those things now. Because behind the scenes, one of the things most people know is they have an army of data analytics people. And I know of companies that had a clinical psychologist on staff to be like, if we put this button here, the chance of somebody clicking on it is higher than if we put it over here, because that's what mobile games are. And then when you put them out, you get a ton of data and you have an army of people saying, all right, this is where the data is. We need to focus on this. We need to focus on that. So they might cost a lot to put up, but the upside for a mobile game is huge. Games like Candy Crush have made over 10, 20 billion dollars,
Whoa.
you know. Um, so like the upside for a successful mobile game is just it's so big that it's not crazy to try to go after it, you know.
Yeah.
And
Is
EA at this in this day and age, EA is all about how they make money. I don't you don't see a lot of new IP or new creative stuff coming, in my opinion. I know EA will probably never hire me for this, but yeah.
I think it's the same with a lot of companies though. The company I work for at the minute, we already made like record money last year, but the shareholders want to make an even bigger return. So this year's like loads of budget cuts and stuff. So I think it's not just EA, it's a bunch of companies. Well, a lot. Yeah. Do you think that now the source code is out there in the public that we might have a major issue with cheating? Does it enable cheaters in the game?
The only way I see it is somebody for a game for 0 hours specifically, as if somebody can write something that sees what's on the screen and tells you what's behind. They can't change the code because 0 hour or general 0 hour uses a networking model called synchronous networking. And the way that works is every computer in the game computes a check number and then it has to be passed to everybody. And if it doesn't, and if they don't all compute, you get a desync. I'm sure you've seen desyncs
Yeah.
in RTM. If they desync, the game's over, you're done. So changing the actual code to cheat just locally does not work in a synchronous model.
Yeah.
Now, synchronous has other issues, like you've probably seen this too. Synchronous games always run at the speed of the slowest computer,
Yeah.
which I mean, back then, if you played with somebody with a really slow computer, your game was at a crawl. It's one of
Still,
the
it still
reasons,
happens now. It still happens in
yeah,
2025.
which is the big reason synchronous networking models aren't really used anymore.
Mhm.
Supreme Commander, PA were all client server models. Yeah.
Okay, but I've seen people cheat in 0 hour and the game not desync. So, for example, map hack, like they can see the units under the fog of war, they can see stealth units, and I've seen like the missile defender of USA, it will shoot regularly, but it can also have its laser locked state where it fires like in rapid fire. And I've seen those like locked in the laser lock state, even though they shouldn't have been. So it fires extra quick. And I've played against the cheater like that. So there's some things that don't desync.
That's why I kind of hesitated quite a bit. Like map hacks are part of that visibility letter. So when you do checks like that, you don't necessarily check everything, and that does not owe it. Not everything comes in that calculation to see if everybody's in sync. So that's why I'm saying like if you change the code for any of those things that get checked, it would desync. But clearly there's things that aren't checked that you can change on the fly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. On the topic of desyncs, then that's like a killer for us at the moment in 0 hour. Only yesterday I played like 6 games on a kind of tournament, and I think 3 of the games ended in a desync after they went like 45 minutes long. in your opinion, what's the way that we solve that? Is it that we go to like everybody, we change the game so everyone joins a server? Or I think Mark Lorenzen was talking about one of the hosts is like in an authoritative state. What's your opinion on the best way to solve those desyncs that we get too many times?
So what Mark was talking about is kind of what I said about a client server model.
Yeah.
If anybody that is listening understands Unreal, that's what a listen server is. Um, or you can do another way to do it is have a dedicated server out somewhere, and that's how Supreme Commander works. That's how Planetary Annihilation works. In order to fix a desync, you actually have to go in the code and figure out why it desynced, which is it's another reason we got away from desync. That is incredibly difficult to debug. It's not simple at all because when it goes to pass around, you just get a check, a number, a checksum number, and that's it. And it's like, well, where did that come from? So you either have to try one thing one by one, or somebody has to come up with an exact repro case of it. And then when that repro case happens, you can kind of figure it out from there. They're incredibly difficult to debug.
Okay. Even if the bunch of developers that are working on it now and come out with a patch and fix a load of desyncs, is there a possibility there still could be such desyncs? Because I have an AMD PC, someone has an Intel PC. Apparently, they work things out differently. Would there still be a risk of desyncs if you had different make computers?
With a game that old, I don't think so. Because the checksum is based on what the data in the game has. Nowadays, I could see it happening. Not that we don't use synchronous network models anymore, but nowadays, if you were going multi-core and doing multi-threaded, I could see that as a possibility. But like I said, nobody does synchronous network models anymore anyway. So
okay, so if it was remade today, if you were gonna make the game today, a Generals 2 or Generals 3, whatever, which model would you go with? Would you go with a dedicated server?
dedicated or a listen server, yeah. All a listen server is a dedicated server that runs on somebody's machine at the
Okay.
same time. That's yeah. Whereas a dedicated server doesn't have anybody playing on that machine. That's basically what it is. There's more nuance than that, but that's basically what it is.
So the listen server, would you still describe that as peer to peer?
No,
No.
no.
Okay.
Yeah. For these games, you are actually playing. So the person who was the when Mark said authoritative, that
Yeah.
means they're also running the server. You're actually playing a different game than anybody else, but it's so close you don't notice.
Okay.
Simply because there's lag on the internet. The server, you tell a unit to move on your machine, it'll see moving differently, but then you got that order has to go to the server, and then that server has to send out to everybody what that order is. That's why everybody can run at their own speeds. In a synchronous model like Generals is, it has to wait till every computer responds saying, okay, we're all in agreement of what happened. So whatever computer is the slowest to make that calculation, that's what everybody runs at.
Yeah. Okay. Just out of curiosity, then, have you been through the source code since it got released, or had a look at it even?
No, I haven't looked at it. It was a long time ago.
And do you watch any Generals or Zero Hour or play it at the minute?
No,
No. Okay.
not because I don't like it or anything against it. It's just I've moved on.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
I do have a dream. I will say I have a dream of someday going back and making another Command and Conquer game.
Yeah.
I would love that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's everyone's dream. So yeah, I had down to you playing the games currently, but you mentioned League of Legends. So that's pretty much the only
Yeah.
game you play at the minute.
So like I said, that's my fallback game when I'm not playing anything else. I'm playing the city builder called Foundation. That's really fun. I like it a lot. I did just finish Expedition 33, which was mind-blowing, amazing. And another game that's hooked me too, mostly because I can play it on the go, is Balatro. Do you know
Okay.
what that is?
I don't know.
So it won Indie Game of the Year last year. It's a roguelike solitaire game. And
Okay.
that sounds weird, but it's actually really amazing.
Yeah. What's it
So
called? Balatro, do you say?
Balatro, Balatro.
A
Yeah.
T R. Okay.
and it's on every platform, including mobile. And it's just, yeah, it's about
Okay.
making you take a deck and you make poker hands, but the way the mechanics are, you can change the cards in your hand, you can change how they work, you get jokers that change and it's all about trying to get every round you have a certain amount of chips you have to make, and there's chips and there's a multiplier, and they play with all this stuff on it, all that stuff together, and it's really fun. Yeah, it's
Okay.
addictive. But yeah, it's a fantastic game. So I play a lot of Balatro as well.
Yeah, that's cool. So yeah, Generals and Zero Hour gets a lot of attention at the minute. Last year's tournament, I think, had like $17,000 of like just private people, just individual viewers putting money together and making tournaments. And I think this year, I don't know if it's on $20,000 or $22,000. Does that surprise you that after all of these years, the community's pulling such prize pools together? And like for the finals last year, we had 2,500 live viewers watching it.
If you would have asked me that 4 months ago, I'd be like, I'm shocked. I'm
Yeah.
shocked. But I now work for World's Edge, and Age of Empires 2 still has tournaments and big things. And actually, we put out, it's amazing that we put out expansions on a 27-year-old game, you know. So
Mhm.
now, knowing what I do now, working at World's Edge, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially because there
Actually,
hasn't been any real Command and Conquer games since what, RA3, I think was the last big one that came out.
yeah, the last big one. There was Command and Conquer 4, but I don't think we'll talk
Oh
about
yeah,
that
with
one.
CNC 4, yeah.
Oh, that reminds me. What was this mysterious CNC 3 you were working on, or are you allowed to say?
I really can't say. It was the next Command and Conquer game, not Red Alert, not Generals.
Okay.
We had some really, really cool ideas that we were working with, and no RTS has done them since. So if I get the opportunity, I'll use them, but I can't go into those things,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Are you allowed to say that's a completely different universe to the Generals or whatever? Or
Oh, it was the original, like the
oh,
Tiberium, yeah, with
okay.
Nod and Guy and the Scrin, yeah.
Ah, okay, okay.
And actually, that's one thing we were going to put the Scrin in, which showed up in CNC, the later CNCs. But yeah, that was going to be the third faction, which ended up happening anyway.
Mhm. Hypothetically, let's say you got asked to make a Generals 2 or a new expansion. Do you have any idea what you might design for it, or any idea how it might be?
Generals too. Well, I would actually jump at the chance to do any Command and Conquer again.
Mm.
In fact, there was a game that just came out, Tempest Rising. That if you
Yeah.
like CNC games, check out Tempest Rising because it's a CNC game, and it's great. If I made a Generals too, yeah, I'd like that. What would I do? Um, I'd probably get rid of the actually base factions and go Generals. Um, I would probably come up with some kind of online metagame. So, like, if I'm playing one of the US ones, there's a global map that I can go take over certain areas with me and everybody that's playing, the Americans. I'd probably try to do something like that. Um, if we're talking business wise, I would make it a premium game so you can buy it and you'd have DLCs. But business wise, there would probably be some kind of you can pay to buy new skins for your tanks. Um, I would probably include actually one of the things I would consider is you are the general. So actually, no, this is what I would do. See, this is the creative process that got
I
going
love
on.
this. I love it.
I would actually, you would choose a general. So the American faction would just be the American faction and nothing else. And you would choose a general, and just the fact that you are that general, you would be incentivized to build different things and get different expansion, different abilities. And I would actually consider it being completely decoupled from the faction. So I could be, General Combs, but I run a Chinese faction. And I would also make it multinational. So I would want a Brazilian general and an African general and a European general and a Thailand general, that sort of thing. Really, I mean, not only business reasons, it's really good to include the whole world, but it also it is also amazing. Like when I was at Tiny Build, I went down and I interviewed, I saw some pitches from some Brazilian devs, which were brilliant, but they were doing stuff based on their mythology and their gods, and I knew nothing about it, and I found it fascinating, and it made me sit there and going, why aren't we doing more of this? Because this is really great stuff that me as American, I didn't even know this stuff existed. So there's a wealth of ideas and opportunities out there, you know. So I would definitely try to incorporate that in the next generals too as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the things like buying new skins and stuff like that, the cosmetic thing, I think that's always a really good idea. I don't know if I'd almost say like a no-brainer because that it's not pay to win, which people complain about in some games, but also there will be a bunch of people that will spend money and want the best skins. But probably I would be one of them. So
Yeah, I mean, I personally would never do a pay to win game. I don't like them. I don't think they're right. Yeah.
yeah. Hmm. If there was a Generals 2 made, do you think it would be a little bit more difficult in today's world, like politically correctness wise, if that's a saying, like the Chinese propaganda towers, and uh,
Yes, it
yeah,
definitely. In fact, there was some real concern about the game because it was being worked on during 9/11.
yeah,
So there was real concern about pivoting that game. By the time it came out in 2003, we felt like the culture had shifted just enough where it's okay. But there was some internal discussions quite heavily when 9/11 happened because of that reason. Um, but you have to keep in mind too that games can also be there. I agree with there would be some politics that it would need to be considered for sure. You can't have Chinese propaganda towers and hope to sell a single copy in China. That's just not going to happen. But an interesting thing that most people don't know is Zero Hour and Generals, when it came out in Germany, at the time, you were not allowed to show humans being hurt or blood in Germany. So the German version of Generals and Zero Hour had circuit boards printed on everybody's faces, and the blood was oil because they were robots. So
yeah, mm,
there are times where, things are changed for cultural reasons. Yeah.
yeah, okay. Yeah, I always wondered why they had like cyborg kind of faces, and I think the terrorist, the guy strapped with explosives strapped to him, he's like a barrel with wheels or something in the German version.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's because the laws in Germany at the time. That's not the
but
case anymore. At the time it was. Yeah.
okay, okay. Again, if you were to make a Generals 2, would you stick with the Sage engine, or people I've spoken to before have talked about moving it to like putting it to Unreal Engine? What's your view on that?
The Sage engine's ancient. Like
Yeah,
it can't handle any of the graphics settings we would want. You basically have to rebuild the engine in order to bring it up to expectations of 2025. Um, I would go either Unreal or Unity for sure. Um, I've shipped games in both. I personally am a Unity fan over Unreal, but both would work. In fact, Industrial Annihilation that I was working on is an Unreal game. So I know it can be
yeah,
done. Um, I know that some of the stuff that Epic has been working on over the last year or two, like their mass entity system, is built to handle games with more units in it. Because Unreal was built to be an RPG and a shooter engine. So, but they're seeing that there's more games out there that need lots more actors running around. So they're, like things like mass entity are things to try to address that. And also, it comes with if I built a game in a Sage engine and I needed to hire somebody, nobody knows that engine. If I built a game in Unreal and I needed to hire somebody, there's lots of Unreal engineers out there and they can come in and immediately know what to do. So there's that great advantage as well.
yeah. I think one thing that people like about Zero Hour is that there's no unit cap. Whereas things like Tempest Rising, which I have played a bit and is kind of okay, but has a unit cap. Um, how might that, let's say someone ported Zero Hour into Unreal Engine and got it all working. How does Unreal Engine work with unit caps, or could it be unlimited? It's just dependent on people's PCs.
That is a deep question. Um, so often a unit cap is put in place for performance reasons. Just
Yeah.
it's hard to handle. And there's a lot of if 0 hour if generals came out and it had a unicap, or 0 hour came out and had a unicap, people would complain about it. But I'm sure you've seen, especially when it first came out, somebody would put in 1,000 units and it would come to a crawl, and you'd see people say this game is shit. It runs like crap and runs like
Yeah.
crap, and it's like, well, you put 1,000 units in the game and it can't handle that. So there are
Yeah.
practical reasons to do that. Um, what I was talking about with Unreal's like mass entity system is to address things like that. The way the Unreal currently works, um, it's hard to get anything moving around the world is called an actor in the engine. And actors are kind of heavyweight, which is fine if you have 100 of them in a Fortnite game, but when you get 10,000 of them running around, your machine will come to a crawl. So they're doing an awesome job of addressing it. And them and like Unity are putting in things to use multi-cores now, which will speed it up as well. So it's a tech issue, basically, is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
That's why unit caps are there. Is just a tech issue.
Yeah. um, yeah, you're right. When people put 1,000 units in, which does happen in 0 hour, only yesterday that happened. And one of our games, it always basically results in a serious error. It comes up saying technical error. You have encountered a serious error. Please close the game and reopen it, and the game just comes to a halt.
And you also see things like, I'm sure you see the navigation kind of breaks down with that many units. They're running into each other and can't navigate all the well. So it's always technical issues that we want to build or produce the best experience for people. And if we have to limit things to not have them a shitty experience, then it's worth it.
Mhm. Is there anything else on 0 hour that you know about that we haven't already covered? I mean, I've run out of my questions now. I want to make sure.
I don't think so. 0 hour
Yeah.
was such a great, tight project. I mean,
Mm.
it's literally in all the games I've shipped, it was literally one of the times where everybody felt like we were in it together. We were sitting on top of each other. We had a plan. We knew the timetable. And it was just all about, when we came up with the General's Challenge, it was like, how do we make this more over the top? The voiceovers we did, you've seen it. It's silly.
Mm.
We just had a blast doing it.
Yeah. Is there any if is there anything you want to plug? Is there any social media that you want people to follow you on, or I mean, don't have to give your private information out, but is there anywhere people can follow you on Twitter or anything like that you want to mention?
No, and unfortunately, when you've been in the industry as long as I have, for lack of a better term, things get toxic. I've had death threats, so
Whoa.
I
Okay.
I tend to stay off of social media for that reason, or my social media is locked down, because it's somebody being upset over the way you balanced Super Monday Night Combat is not worth your life. And I'm also very conservative. Like I'll just back off and be like, you know what? I don't need this. I'm not
Yeah.
someone who charges at it. So it's hard to find me on social media, and that's by design.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Fair enough.
am at John Combs on X, but you'll see like two posts. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah. Some people taking that way too seriously. I can't believe you just mentioned that. That's crazy. Um,
It's
but
scary, and when they come back, oh, he was just scared. He was just joking. And it's like, I don't know that. You're some rando on the
yeah.
internet. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
scary, especially when you have a wife and kids. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. World can do without that for sure. Oh, the one thing I did want to mention, you mentioned at the start about this EA spouse thing, and I kind of know what that was about. It's about EA making the workforce work too many hours and stuff like that. But I don't think any of the viewers will know. Is there anything else you want to say about that?
It was a mandatory 9 months of 90 hours a week. I think in those 9 months, I had 3 to 5 days off. And when you're working that much, at the time, the blog came out and so many people said, well, just find a new job. When you're working that much, it takes time to find a new job. And, you don't have time to work on your resume. They brought in a laundry service because people didn't have time to do their laundry. We had breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. I put on 35 pounds during that time just because it was ridiculously stressful. I was at work every day, every moment of every day. It was it was horrible, and
Yeah.
it needed to be talked about, and that blog started talking about it. And it's definitely gotten better over the years. There's still select studios that have issues with it, but honestly, I haven't done a non-mandatory crunch in 15 years.
Yeah.
You know, I've crunched sometimes just because I get excited about stuff or I know a deadline's coming up, and it's never been more than like 2 weeks. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, like it's not anywhere remotely as bad as it used to be.
Yeah. So just for any of the viewers that don't know, then as far as I understand it, there was the spouse of one of the employees at EA basically took EA to court and wrote a blog post about it. Is that correct? Yeah.
They took
Okay.
EA to court. They wrote a blog post about it, which led to taking EA to court. EA, they had what do they call it? Where a whole group of people file a lawsuit.
Oh, like a class action thing.
Class action. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I unfortunately didn't get to be involved in that because the class action lawsuits were if your title was engineer or artist, and my title was designer. So I
Okay.
could have brought a lawsuit against them myself, but the lawyer costs would have been negated by the what I got back. So, but yeah, it actually ended up some big pullback or big lawsuits against EA. There was a couple of Californian laws that came out of it about creatives being able to be paid overtime. So there was, yeah, it was pretty big. I
Yeah.
actually, my ex-wife and I um, had met right around then, and she was in communications and stuff, and she knew somebody at the New York Times, and I actually interviewed with the New York Times about the situation there.
Okay.
And at the end of it, I was going to a goodbye lunch for a teammate at least once a week. It got pretty bad. Battle for Middle Earth was a rough project.
So those 9 months that you mentioned, that was during Battle for Middle Earth, or did it also cover Zero Hour or any other game?
No, it was just Battle for Middle Earth. Yeah.
Battle for Middle Earth. Okay.
Yeah, I had finished Zero Hour, worked on CNC 3, and then went over to Battle for Middle Earth. And they even had this concept of pre-crunch. We crunch first because so that we don't have to crunch as much later, which just ended up the worst crunch ever anyway. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. See, this is all like a bit alien to me because in my work now, I have like a 37.5 hour contract per week. And anything I do over that, I mean, I might do the odd hour here or there. I know it's a completely different industry, the games industry, but I would expect like if I was working 90 hours, I would expect to be paid overtime. But that was not the case, no? Or
No,
no?
no, not the case at all. If you're an hourly employee, you get to be paid overtime, which ironically right now I am. Um, but for the most part, no, because you're salaried, you get your salary. But no companies do that. Not no, but the vast, vast majority of companies don't do that anymore. You know, World's Edge owned by Microsoft. Some people work here and there extra hours, but our people have learned how to I mean, processes change, right? How you build a game is a process. So here's a perfect example. In Battle for Middle Earth, we'd come up with a unit we want, and we'd throw our designers on it, our engineers on it, our artists, our animators, our effects guys, our audio guys, and we'd build out the entire unit and then put it in the game. And there was things that happened like that and went in the game and it's like, oh, this is terrible. And then we all that work just got thrown away. Nowadays, the way I work is like you write the minimum amount of code, you make them gray boxes, and you throw it in. And if it's fun when they're gray boxes, it's going to be fun when it's pretty. So you'd save a lot more time. So processes have changed to help that as well.
Yeah. Okay. There was one other question I didn't ask was you kind of mentioned before you've done loads of different roles. You've mentioned you've been a lead. Well, I think I found on Moby Games you've got like lead programmer. You've done senior content designer. On Zero Hour you were a designer. How come you do so many different things? Is it because you just want a variety and you like the variety, or yeah, why is there so many different things you do?
Some of it's a personality thing. I'm a firm believer that if you're a creative, you not need to know how to use your tools. So like if you play the guitar, you should know how to play a guitar. You don't just sit there and write sheet music. If you're a potter, you put your hands in the clay. If you're a game designer, you should know how your code and engine works. So that's a core. Not everybody agrees with me, obviously, because there's a lot of designers out there that spend all day in Word and Excel. So I believe in hands-on stuff. That's some of it. some of it, and like Zero Hour is a perfect example because I knew how to do that. You
Mhm.
know, when we did Zero Hour, I was in the industry for 2 years. That's it. But I was one of the senior guys because I was the one that went in and did shit. Um, that's some of it. Another part of it is I was an indie for 70 years, 17 years. And when you're an indie, you don't have the luxury of just being one thing. So, I was the creative director for Uber Entertainment for 9 years and the design director of Team Grit. And yeah, I did some of that stuff, but shit needed to get done, and if I want to I did the whole single player stuff for Planetary Annihilation, me and one other guy. And I couldn't do that if I was just writing docs all day. So some of
Mhm.
it was practical, some of it is belief, so yeah. And
Okay.
at this point, I like being able to say, one of the very few people I can build an entire game myself, do all the parts of it, and that's a source of pride in me. So
That's really cool. That's really cool. And I know we're jumping back to AI here, but I just thought we mentioned before about how much it costs to make these type of games, and it can cost however many millions, probably I don't know, over hundreds of millions. But with the rise of AI, do you see it being cheaper in the future, in maybe 5 years, 10 years, to get out a game, or do you ever see an AI actually making a whole game?
yes and yes. AI has already sped things up immensely. Like I would say that probably 10 to 15% of my code is AI. Just because it makes it faster. If I'm writing a function and it suggests another one, and it's exactly what I want. I hit tab and it's done. It's even things as little as that. It's just less typing.
Mhm.
Um, and it's already happening. It's not 5, 10 years time. It's next year, the year after. It's already happening. In fact, my girlfriend, she's a therapist and wanted to write a book, and she literally just in the last week spent 9 days dictating it to Gemini and has her first draft done in 9 days. 125-page book. So
Wow.
that's the point where so like the ability to be creative and not have to carry along a lot of the weight to get what your vision is done. AI helps with that immensely. So that's here, that's going to happen. And
Mhm.
then actually, one of my business partners, when I did Utopos, which was the company that I had, he's now working at a company called Bitmagic, and they are actually doing a game where you build a game inside of it using AI. So that's
Okay.
that's also here and not very far off. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Really
think the
exciting
big
times.
challenge in the future is there's going to be so many games and creative things out there, is how do you break through the noise so people see what you built? I think that's going to be the big challenge going forward.
Hmm.
Because it's great. You have an idea and you can build something quickly. I mean, that's what everybody wants to do, right? I don't
Yeah.
want to. So a lot of people are like, I have an idea for a game. If you could build that without coding or art in the next month, why wouldn't you? You know?
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Really exciting times. Yeah. That's all I had then. Is there anything else you'd like to add or mention?
I don't think so. Play Age of Empires games so I can keep my job. Play Generals in Zero Hour, and then when you're done with that, go play some Age 2 and Age 4 games. Yeah,
Yeah.
buy the
Yeah.
DLCs.
Age of Empires 2 still massively popular. I remember playing Age of Empires 4, thinking, "Oh, this is like amazing. The graphics are like really good. Surely people won't go back to Age of Empires 2 or 3 or whatever other ones." But I still think 2 is the king. Yeah.
Yeah, 2, 4, and Mythology are the ones that are still going strong. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's still a group out there playing 3 as well. I don't know about Age 1. I know nothing about Age 1. But yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
it's an
Okay.
insanely popular franchise, and I'm honestly really blessed to be working on it. I'm really happy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's some really massive ones you've worked on. Yeah. Command and Conquer, Age, and what was the other one? Supreme Commander. Did you
Annihilation.
say? Oh, Annihilation.
Annihilation.
Yeah.
There's like there's I call them the Annihilation games, but it's Total Annihilation, Supreme Commander, Planetary Annihilation, and then Industrial Annihilation, which are always really hard words to say. But Supreme Commander falls in that. If you play those games, there's a different style all those games have. You
Yeah.
know, a lot of the games have gone smaller units, smaller squads and stuff, whereas you could have 10,000 units running around Planetary Annihilation, and it runs it just fine. I used to tell people, in the other RTS's games, you build one factory. In PA, why build one when you can build 10? Because that's what the game was about, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
This was fun. I'm glad we did this.
Yeah, it's really cool. All the viewers are going to love hearing about the creation of the generals and everything you mentioned here. So yeah, thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Very welcome.
Cool. All right then. Cool. Take care then, and speak soon.
You too. Yeah.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.